And finally tonight, we remember the life and work of a gifted foreign correspondent. Anthony Shadid's reporting took him from one conflict zone to the next, from Egypt.
This is Anthony Shadid for the New York Times in Cairo. In some ways, one revolution may have ended tonight with the overthrow of President Hosni Mubarak, and another revolution may have begun.
And Iraq.
Baghdad's a pretty grim place right now.
To Libya.
The road to Tripoli is about an 8-hour drive that seems to capture the hopes, ambitions, anxieties, and fears of a country wrestling with its future.
And finally, Syria.
We've seen scenes of hundreds of thousands of people gathering in downtown Hama.
It was in Syria that Shadid died yesterday of a severe asthma attack while reporting on the violent crackdown by the Assad government. An American of Lebanese descent, Shadid had spent much of his career covering the Middle East for several news organizations, most recently the New York Times. He also appeared often on the NewsHour with his reporting from the region. As one of the few American reporters fluent in Arabic, Shadid was able to shine light on untold human stories.
Security remains the overwhelming topic of conversation in Baghdad today. Of these three families that I was spending time with over the past few weeks, it's almost the only thing they wanted to talk about.
He won 2 Pulitzer Prizes for his dispatches in 2004 and 2010, both while working for the Washington Post. David Hoffman was his editor at the paper.
You know, what made his writing special was his reporting. He was one of the most relentless and tireless reporters I ever worked for. And only after he had listened to hundreds of hours of people talking, after he had filled notebooks, literally buckets full of notebooks with things he had seen and smelled and heard, did he actually sit down to write. And as one of his friends said, you know, he's one of those few people that wrote poetry on deadline. Anthony's great brilliance about war reporting was that the story was not only the great tumult of violence and the bombs falling and the strategy, but also the people who suffered in every war. And every single time he got in his car and he went to the dark corners of a place where people had their lights out, he would sit on the floor, he would ask them, what was your experience like?
It was often dangerous work. In 2002, Shadid survived a gunshot wound while covering the West Bank. Last March, he and 3 other Times journalists were kidnapped in Libya by forces loyal to Muammar Gaddafi as they covered the revolution. They were detained for 6 days.
Those first 3 days were the most harrowing. As soon as we humanized ourselves, as soon as we became, people in their eyes, we were treated at times better. But, I don't want to dismiss what, what was, visited upon us over those first 72 hours.
In 2005, I talked with Shadid about his approach to his work when we discussed his book, Night Draws Near, about the Iraq War. Now, you had the advantage of speaking the language. How important was that?
It was important during the invasion because I could get out on my own, and that was critical. In the aftermath, I found language most helpful in trying to, create a fuller portrait of what was going on. In a way, I think language added the background noise. Sometimes it was the choice of words, the sayings, how they fit into the bigger conversation.
Capturing such intimate portrayals of life amid war, Shadid said, was a goal of his reporting.
I had made a decision before the invasion began to stay in Baghdad, to try to get a sense of how a city was going to react to an invasion, a city under siege. And it was pretty early on in the war that people started talking a little bit more honestly than they might have before the invasion. And it was actually something my editors saw as well, that there was a story to tell perhaps in what people were saying, just popular sentiments, and that popular sentiments might be more revealing than we thought they would be.
Anthony Shadid was 43 years old. He leaves behind a wife and 2 children.